Ryoanji. 1. I'd like to give you some information about Ryoanji Temple. Ryoanji Temple was built by Hosokawa Katsumoto in the middle of the 15th century. Hosokawa was a top-ranking warlord under the Ashikaga shogunate. He invited Giten Gensho to be its founding priest. Its rock garden is said to have been created in the 15th century, soon after the founding of the temple. This temple suffered a devastating fire at the end of the 18th century, but fortunately its garden remained intact. The present building was reconstructed after the fire.
I've read a book which said that Ryoanji has the most famous rock garden in the world. Since Queen Elizabeth II visited Ryoanji Temple in 1975 and gave the garden high praise, more visitors have been coming, haven't they?
You're very well informed. Rock gardens are Zen-style gardens.
What's Zen?
Zen is the Buddhist practice of seeking enlightenment through sitting in meditation. This emphasizes the importance of attaining enlightenment by direct intuition without dependence on Buddhist scripture. 2. Sitting by the rock garden. This garden is a dry landscape garden.
Dry landscape garden? What's that?
It consists of rocks and sand. The rocks usually represent mountains, and the sand represents water.
Why are rocks used instead of trees?
One interpretation could be that rocks never move, so we can concentrate on our meditation. How many rocks can you see?
Let me count. 14?
There are 15 rocks, but no one can see all 15 rocks. I think that this garden is trying to teach us that there are many ways of looking at things and that no one can see everything. That's part of Zen teaching. What does this garden suggest to you?
There's moss growing under the rocks. The moss looks like trees, so the rocks look like mountains.
That's a good interpretation. One of the most interesting interpretations is a tiger carrying her cubs across the river. Can you guess what represents the mother tiger and the cubs?
The white sand represents the river, and the rocks represent the tiger and her cubs, right?
That's right. 3. According to a Chinese tale, if a mother tiger has 3 cubs, one cub is always ferocious and eats the other cubs when the mother tiger is not with them. A mother tiger has to take her 3 cubs across a river, but can carry only one at a time. One of the cubs is really ferocious and always tries to eat the other 2. She cannot leave the ferocious cub alone with the others, so she takes the ferocious cub across the river first and leaves it on the far bank. She goes back and gets another of the cubs and brings it across the river. She leaves it on the far side and brings the ferocious cub back with her. She collects the other cub, leaving the ferocious cub on the near side of the river, and takes it across. Finally, she can return to the ferocious cub and take it across. Now she has all 3 cubs safely across the river.
That's an interesting story. The mother tiger was very clever.
There are several other different explanations. Islands in an ocean is the most typical interpretation, with the rocks representing islands and the white sand representing the ocean. Mountain peaks in a sea of clouds is also an interesting interpretation, with the white sand representing the clouds and the rocks representing the mountains.
The interpretation with the sand representing the clouds is interesting too.
4. This garden is also called the Garden of 753 because of the layout of the rocks.
Does 753 have any special significance?
Yes, I'll try to explain it in simple terms. These numbers can't be divided. The word for divide is waru in Japanese, which can also mean break. 7, 5, and 3 can't be divided, so they are auspicious numbers in Japan.
I understand. The rocks look like people meditating too.
Look at this Chinese character on this piece of paper. The 5 groups of rocks represent this character. It's kokoro, which means heart.
I feel that the rocks are talking to us.
Yes, rocks talk to us without using words. This garden will give you an unlimited amount of advice. It won't speak to those who look at things with their eyes, but it will speak to those who look at things with their own hearts.
I can see that. There's nothing flashy about this garden, is there?
No bridges, no ponds, no lanterns.
But if there were ponds, we wouldn't have to use our imagination so much, would we?
That's very perceptive. With nothing to restrict your imagination here, you can enter the spiritual world. 5.
I have a question. The white sand is spread out in a geometric pattern. How is this geometric pattern on the sand created?
It's raked by priests every 10 days.
This geometric pattern reminds me of the gardens at the Palace of Versailles.
That's a good point, too. Let me explain the dimensions of this garden. It's 25 meters from east to west, and it's 10 meters from north to south. The height of this wall is 1.8 meters.
By the way, what's the wall surrounding this garden made of?
It's called an oil earth wall. This earthen wall is made of mud mixed with rapeseed oil.
Rapeseed oil? Why?
To protect it from the glare of the garden's white sand. It can withstand years of exposure and changes in climate.
I like the various hues of colour on this wall. It's difficult for me to express my feelings, but I can find an elegant beauty in this simplicity.
That's regarded as an important part of wabi-sabi. It's difficult even for a Japanese person like me to describe it. Zen gardens carry you to a whole different world of aesthetics.
I'm interested in the meaning of wabi-sabi.
There's no perfect explanation, but basically it's the fundamental spirit underlying most of Japanese culture. You can also say it's the spirit of the artist who tries to embody his or her artistic taste in a simplified mode of expression. You can find this spirit in tea ceremony, flower arrangement, monochrome painting, and Zen-style gardens.
I'm gradually starting to understand. Even rocks can say a lot through their refined arrangements.
Yes, in a sense, a symbol alone is enough to express the whole, so I think the spirit of wabi-sabi comes through in this garden. 6. In front of the water basin. This is the stone water basin. There's a tea room over there. When you're invited to a formal tea ceremony, you'll find this kind of water basin. This is the place where you wash your hands.
It looks like a coin.
Yes, it really does. On each side of the square, you can see 4 kanji. It has a square hole in the middle. This square hole is one part of each of those 4 Chinese characters. Look at these kanji. Ware, tada, tada oshiru.
What does that mean?
It says, I only learn to be content, or I'm content with what I am.
Could you explain in more detail?
If you want to learn to be content, you are spiritually rich even if you are poor. Even if you are materially rich, if you don't want to learn to be content, you are spiritually poor. 7. Walking around the outer garden. This garden is a stroll-style garden of the Heian period, from the end of the 8th to the end of the 12th century, and it's also a borrowed landscape garden, with Mount Kinugasa behind incorporated into the scenery. This pond is called Kyoyochi Pond. Many mandarin ducks lived in this pond. Mandarin duck is oshidori in Japanese, so this pond is commonly known as Oshidori Pond. This pond is popular among Japanese couples. Can you guess why?
I majored in ornithology. As legend goes, a mandarin duck usually stays with one mate during its whole life. Even if its partner dies, the duck doesn't mate with other birds.
You're very knowledgeable. This fidelity has a romantic connotation for Japanese people. An oshidori couple means an ideal couple.
That's interesting.
You can also enjoy the contrast between the stillness of the rock garden and the movement of this kyoyochi within the compound of Ryoanji Temple. Nijojo 1. Before we arrive at Nijo Castle, let me explain a big difference between Nijo Castle and other classic castles such as Osaka Castle and Himeji Castle. It was Shogun Tokugawa Ieyasu who unified Japan in 1603. In the same year, Nijo Castle was completed by Tokugawa Ieyasu for administrative purposes, not military. This was 17 years before the Mayflower reached America from England.
I see. This is the first time for me to visit a Japanese castle. Could you say more about the functions of Nijo Castle?
Nijo Castle served as the residence of the Tokugawa family and their retainers when they visited Kyoto. Shogun Tokugawa Ieyasu wanted to show his authority by building a gorgeous castle. It's no exaggeration to say that Nijo Castle was a display of his power.
By the way, could you explain the difference between the emperor and the shogun?
In short, the emperor had no power during the Edo era, which began in 1603 and ended in 1867. The emperor was a figurehead. The Tokugawa shogun was the top administrator. 1603 was the year in which Nijo Castle was built, and 1867 was when the 15th Tokugawa shogun, Yoshinobu, announced the restoration of sovereignty to the emperor at Nijo Castle. This means that Nijo Castle witnessed both the rise and fall of the Tokugawa shogunate. In front of Higashi Otemon Gate. Here we are at Nijo Castle.
What are those upside-down fishes on either side of the gate roof?
It's a mythical fish called a shachi that protects the building from fire. 2. In front of the samurai guardhouse.
What are these mannequins doing?
The mannequins are samurai warriors from Edo. They're checking the visitors. Okay, you have to show them your passport. I'm only joking.
Why is their hair up in top knots?
Warriors had to wear helmets when they went into battle. It's said that they felt hot and their heads started to smell musty in battle, so they became irritated and dizzy, and in the end, they pulled their hair up on top of their heads.
That's interesting. Was it only the samurai warriors who had this top knot hairstyle?
No, it caught on, and almost all the men started doing it.
What's that sign on the back of their kimonos?
It's a family crest.
Family crest. What's that?
Each family has a family crest. The marks for family crests are things like flowers, trees, and insects. This is based on our nature worship. The family crest of the Tokugawa is a hollyhock. That of the imperial family is a chrysanthemum. You can see both the hollyhock crest and the chrysanthemum crest in Nijo Castle, because Nijo Castle was the property of the Imperial Household Agency for a few decades. You can tell which family they are from by looking at the family crest.
That's interesting. The function of a family crest is similar to that of the patterns on fishermen's sweaters. You can tell which family they're from by the knitting patterns.
That's news to me. Thanks a lot for the useful information. 3.
By the way, why are the samurai mannequins carrying two swords?
The long sword is for fighting. They use the short sword for committing suicide by cutting their bellies. This is called harakiri. When samurai were captured by the enemy, they committed harakiri to prove their loyalty to their masters.
Why did the samurai stab themselves in the belly instead of the heart when committing suicide?
As you know, hara means belly. Westerners' hearts are the equivalent of our hara. There are many expressions about the hara. For example, your hara is black means you're nasty or you're guilty. That's why they opened their bellies, to prove their hara wasn't black and to prove their innocence.
When I go back to Ireland, I'll explain the significance of harakiri. It's one of the mysteries of Japan back in my country.
In front of the Karamon Gate. This is a Chinese-style gate called the Karamon. You can see the chrysanthemum family crest on the top. Look at the gorgeous carvings. Gold is used lavishly. This gate shows the power of the Tokugawa family. There are cranes, flowers, and butterflies carved on the outer panels. There are carvings of a Chinese tiger and a dragon in the panel over the doors, because, according to the Chinese zodiac, Ieyasu was born in the year of the tiger, and his grandson Iemitsu was born in the year of the dragon. 4.
What are the signs of the Chinese zodiac?
In its yearly sequence, they are mouse, ox, tiger, hare, dragon, serpent, horse, sheep, monkey, cock, dog, and wild boar. This is the year of the ox. I was born in the year of the ox, so I'm 36 years old, and so this year is my lucky year.
That's interesting. I'd like to get my picture taken in front of this gate.
Okay, this is an ideal spot for photographs. After taking pictures, I'm sure you'll enjoy the inside of Nijo Castle because inside it's a palace, even though from the outside it looks like a military fortress. Before we go inside, I'll tell you 3 points I want you to pay attention to. 1. The sound of the corridor. 2. The many gorgeous paintings on the walls, the carvings on the transoms, and the recessed ceilings. 3. The relationship between each room's function and its decoration.
Okay, I'll keep those 3 points in mind.
At the carriage porch. This is a carriage porch called kuruma yosei, where carriages used to come in. This carriage porch enabled people to enter this building without getting wet.
So it functions as an entrance and as a temporary parking space.
Yes. Please take off your shoes and put them in the shoebox. 5. Look at these 2 rooms called the Willow Room. These rooms were named after the paintings on the walls and sliding doors. The outsider feudal lords had their identities checked here. Let me explain the 3 categories of feudal lord.
What's that sound? When I moved, the floor squeaks. Oh no, have I put on weight? No, I weighed myself this morning, but I hadn't. The floor needs repairing, doesn't it?
This floor was devised to detect intruders.
Oh, really? Could you tell me about this device?
When you step on the floor, this causes friction between the clamps under the floor. The clamps cause the floor to squeak. This is called a nightingale floor. You can hear a nightingale singing.
It's an excellent security measure. I think the inventor of this device was really smart.
Before I go on to talk about the next room, let me explain the 3 categories of feudal lords. The outsider feudal lords became vassals of Tokugawa after his victory at the Battle of Sekigahara in 1600. The hereditary feudal lords were those who sided with Tokugawa before that battle in 1600, and the relative feudal lords were relatives of Tokugawa. 6. In front of the Tozamurai no Ma. These 2 rooms are waiting chambers for outsider feudal lords.
What are these 3 big animals painted on the screen doors and walls?
They are tigers and leopards. They symbolize the Tokugawa family's power, though there were no tigers or leopards living in Japan 400 years ago. Only their hides were imported. Painters used their imaginations by looking at the hides. That's why they look a little bit different from the real thing. From an artistic point of view, the tigers blended nicely with the bamboo. In front of the Shikidai no Ma. This is the room where cabinet ministers greeted outsider feudal lords and received presents for the shogun.
The pine trees on the sliding doors and walls are enormous.
The pine tree is a symbol of longevity. These pine trees are very large, but are fitted nicely into the space between the floor and ceiling. This shows the stability of the Tokugawa government. This masterpiece was painted by Kano Tanyu when he was 25 years old. In front of the Ohiroma San no Ma. This is the waiting room for outsider feudal lords. Notice the panel in the transom. It's 35 centimeters thick. Each of the panels in the transoms is made from a single block of cypress. It's carved on both sides with different patterns. The obverse side is carved with peacocks, and the reverse side is carved with a pine tree and a peony.
By the way, what's this flower-shaped thing?
The nails are covered with gold-plated copper in the shape of a flower. Even a nail was transformed into something of beauty.
That's nice. Your explanations always hit the nail on the head.
7. In front of the Ohiroma Ichi no Ma, Ni no Ma. This is the place where the 15th Tokugawa shogun, Yoshinobu, assembled the feudal lords and announced the restoration of sovereignty to the emperor in 1867. These rooms are the most gorgeously decorated in order to show the shogun's power.
Who's that man with the headgear on the raised floor?
He's the shogun. A page boy is holding his sword for him.
Who are the 4 men facing each other?
They are the shogun's cabinet ministers. The men prostrating themselves before the shogun are outsider feudal lords.
Why do they carry 1 sword instead of 2?
They are allowed to carry only 1 short sword with them, because this isn't the place for them to fight.
Why does everyone wear long trousers?
This is a formal occasion, so they are in full dress. They're showing the proper decorum.
Why do they have folding fans in front of them? Was the conference held on a hot day?
No, just as people in European countries wear gloves on ceremonial occasions, Japanese people carry folding fans on ceremonial occasions, even on the coldest day. Placing a folding fan in front of oneself shows respect for the other person. In this case, the outsider feudal lords are showing their respect for the shogun. A Japanese-style folding fan is a symbol of respect, good luck, and friendship too.
I've decided to buy folding fans for my friends to deepen my friendship with them.
8. There is a bodyguard's room behind the sliding doors with the beautiful tassels. You never know what's going on behind the scenes. Actually, several armed guards were on standby there. In the event of an emergency, the bodyguards would be prepared to jump out at the intruders if the shogun clapped his hands.
Wow, they sound like secret agents, right?
That's exactly right. The characteristic features of this room are the gorgeous recessed alcove, the staggered shelves, the ornamented doors, the recessed ceiling, double recessed ceiling, and the attached writing desk in the wall along the corridor. Please look at the gorgeously painted pine trees, the use of gold, and the doubled recessed ceiling above the shogun in this room. They show the shogun's power. The shogun had to overwhelm the outsider feudal lords. The size of these floors is 92 tatami mats. Japanese rooms are measured in tatami mats.
I see. I wonder how much money it cost to construct this room. Heavy taxes must have been imposed on the common people.
In front of the Kuro Shoin. This is the place where the shogun had private interviews with relative feudal lords and hereditary feudal lords. The 15th shogun, Yoshinobu, talked about whether he should return sovereignty to the emperor or not in this room. This is also called the cherry blossom room because of the paintings on the sliding doors. The special feature of this room is the 2 sets of staggered shelves in the right corner.
This room is less gorgeous than the grand chamber.
The shoguns didn't have to overwhelm their relatives or the hereditary feudal lords. 9. In front of the Shiro Shoin. This is the room where the shogun rested when he was off duty. You can see only female attendants here. They're the shogun's concubines.
The paintings on the walls are mountain and water scenes. Why are these paintings so different from those in other rooms?
These paintings create a really relaxing and peaceful atmosphere. The shogun didn't have to show his political strength in front of his concubines. Please look at these beautiful women. One woman is serving tea for the shogun. She is trying to find out whether the shogun loves her or not. If the shogun drinks the whole cup, it means he loves her. If he doesn't, it means, sorry, you aren't my cup of tea.
By the way, why does the woman sitting in that gorgeous dark kimono have her teeth dyed black?
There are 2 theories about having your teeth dyed black. One is that it was a custom for women who had reached adulthood. Another is that it indicated a married woman. However, there is no woman in this room who is legally married. Black can never be dyed, in other words, it'll never change. This meant she would be faithful to her husband. Married women had their eyebrows shaved off, probably because eyebrows show your feelings when you get angry. They did this in order to hide their feelings.
By the way, why do the women have short swords, daggers?
It's said that a woman used a dagger to protect herself. A sword is also a charm against evil. 10. In front of the Ohiroma Yonoma. Please look at this room. This is the room where the shogun's spears, swords, and other weapons were kept. You can see screen paintings of pine trees and hawks.
Wow, this looks like a show of strength by the Tokugawa. Do you know the meaning of the verb hawk? It means to attack violently.
Thanks for teaching me that. I didn't know that hawk was also used as a verb. Let's go on to the next room.
I should say farewell to arms.
I like that novel of Ernest Hemingway's. In front of the Roju no Ma. The next 3 rooms are ministers' offices. Look at the plain upper walls and plank ceilings. Do you know why these rooms are less decorated?
Yes, these rooms are not public areas, so the Tokugawa shogun didn't have to show off his power.
In front of the Chokushi no Ma. This is the room where imperial messengers were received. The shogun took the lower level and gave the imperial messengers the higher level to show them respect.
Each room has its own function.
11. After the tour of all the rooms. I hope you enjoyed the palace. Can you guess how many rooms you went through?
20 rooms?
No, 34 rooms. How many tatami mats are there in this building?
350 tatami mats.
No, 800 tatami mats. There are 450 meters of corridors, and this palace has an area of 3,300 square meters. Ninomaru Palace is laid out in a flying geese pattern so that we can appreciate the gardens from inside the palace. If you look down at Ninomaru Palace from the air, the building looks like a flock of geese flying in a diagonal formation. Let's have a look at Ninomaru Garden. This garden consists of stones, trees, and running water. It's said that the stones are suggestive of human bones, the water is suggestive of blood, and the trees are suggestive of human skin. It shows that the human body is closely related to nature.
There are these big rocks strewn about all over the place. Is there any particular arrangement to them?
No, there isn't. It was popular to offer rocks as gifts 400 years ago.
Rocks as gifts? How were they brought here?
How they were transported is not clear. A rock was regarded as a symbol of loyalty. Rocks were carried here to show the feudal lord's loyalty to the shogun. One story has it that these rocks were often wrapped in silk, put on carts, and brought here in elaborate ceremonies.
Wrapped in silk?
You may be surprised, but even now a rock is a symbol of wealth. Some rich Japanese people may buy a rock for as much as 1,000,000 yen.
You're kidding! I can't believe that.
12. I'll carry on talking about the garden. This garden was designed by Kobori Enshu, who was a famous landscape architect as well as a master of the tea ceremony. Look at the center of the pond. You can find 3 islands. The island of eternal happiness is in the center. The crane island is to the left, and the turtle island is to the right.
Do turtles and cranes have any particular significance?
Yes, there's an expression. The crane lives 1,000 years, and the turtle lives 10,000 years. You can see statues of cranes and turtles in many Japanese-style gardens.
Both the crane and the turtle are considered to be sacred, aren't they?
Yes, they are often used as decorations at auspicious occasions, such as wedding ceremonies. By the way, this garden originally didn't have any trees. Can you guess why?
Let me see. The government didn't have the money to plant trees?
No, leaves fall from trees. As the samurai warriors themselves didn't want to fall, they didn't like to see falling leaves.
I feel I'm gradually coming to understand the way of the samurai.
Do you have any questions?
This question is not related to the garden. How did they keep the rooms in Ninomaru Palace warm in the cold winters?
They probably used braziers. By burning charcoal inside the brazier, they warmed the room. Sanju Sangendo 1. Before we arrive at Sanju Sangendo Temple, let me give you some background. In the 12th and 13th centuries, Japan had a series of wars, and people had become nervous. So the retired emperor, Go-Shirakawa, wanted to calm their nerves and ordered Taira no Kiyomori, an army general, to build a temple. Sanju Sangendo Temple was founded in the late 12th century.
In other words, Taira no Kiyomori founded this temple in accordance with a retired emperor's wishes.
That's right. The present building is a reconstruction after a disastrous fire in the middle of the 13th century. This is the only temple in Japan where you can see so many statues of Buddha in one hall. In front of Sanju Sangendo Temple. Here we are at Sanju Sangendo Temple. It has the longest frontage in Japan with a length of 118 meters, 390 feet. Please take off your shoes and put them in the shoebox. Taking pictures is prohibited inside the temple. In front of the altar. Let me explain why it's called Sanju Sangendo. Sanju Sangendo literally means the Hall of 33 Spaces. Look at the spaces between the pillars. It's called this because there are 33 spaces between the pillars in front of the altar.
Does the number 33 have a special meaning?
Yes, 33 is an important symbolic number in Buddhism, and it's especially associated with the worship of Kannon. Kannon appears in 33 different forms in response to each individual's needs in order to save them. 2.
Wow, so many Buddhist statues. They're quite overpowering.
Sanju Sangendo is also known as the Temple of 1,000 Statues because of its 1,001 Buddhist statues. Besides the main one, there are 1,000 life-size statues of the 1,000-armed Kannon. Do you know how many incarnations you can see?
33 times 1001. That makes 33,033 incarnations.
Wow, you're good at arithmetic.
Does 1,000 have a special meaning?
Yes, in the 12th century, when Sanju Sangendo Temple was founded, 1,000 signified perfection in Japan. In a sense, 1,000 was considered the largest possible number. Each kannon in this temple possesses 42 hands, and each of their extra 40 hands is said to take on 25 different forms in order to save human beings. 40 times 25 makes 1,000 hands. Therefore, 40 hands are regarded as 1,000 hands. Each kannon has one eye in each palm. Each eye can see 25 worlds and therefore represents 1,000 eyes. 500 standing life-size statues have been placed to the right and left of the main sitting statues in 10 rows and 50 columns. 124 were made when this temple was built, and 876 were made in the 13th century when the temple was renovated.
The Kannon bodhisattvas all look almost identical.
These images were carved by 70 sculptors, and it took about 100 years, so all of them have different faces. Please look at them carefully. You might be able to find a loved one, for example, your grandmother.
Hey, I found one that looks like my granny. I feel a kind of nostalgia and tranquility looking at so many statues.
I'm happy to hear that. 3. Having a great number of Buddhist statues and repeating Buddhist prayers many times is typical of the 12th and the 13th centuries. People relied on Buddha in that age of confusion. They believed they would gain a lot of merit by doing so. Look at this fierce-looking statue. This is the thunder god. The wind god is on the far side of the altar.
What does the thunder god signify?
The thunder god makes thunder by hitting a drum. The wind god carries a wind bag over his shoulder and creates wind by opening it. Both of them are sitting on pedestals in the shape of a cloud.
The thunder god looks really scary. I think both the wind and the thunder would cause a lot of damage to crops.
As well as fearing the thunder god and the wind god, people worship them both as gods who controlled the rain, because both the wind and rain bring good harvests. Here you can see the 28 followers of Buddha lined up in a row.
What role do they play?
They protect Kannon and pious Buddhists who believe in Kannon. It's difficult to remember their names, but they have one thing in common. What is it?
Let me have a closer look at them. Their eyes are made of crystal?
Your answer is correct. These crystal eyes make them more realistic. You can date Buddhist figures with crystal eyes to the Kamakura period, from the 12th to the 14th century. 4. Look at the seated image of the 1,000-armed Kannon with 11 faces. This central figure was carved by the famous sculptor Kano Tankei. He made it when he was 82 years old.
Awesome! What are the statues made of?
These figures are carved out of cypress. A special method called yosegi zukuri was used, and then gold leaf was applied onto a lacquer base.
What is this yosegi zukuri method?
First, the wooden blocks are carved separately, and then they are joined together to make a complete statue.
I'm curious to know why these images have 11 faces.
They represent human feelings and save human beings in all directions. You can see 3 merciful faces at the front, 3 angry faces on the left side, 3 fanged faces on the right side, and 1 open-mouthed laughing face behind. There's an enlightened face on the top.
That's interesting. Why are they sitting on a lotus?
Because the lotus flower is considered a sacred flower in Buddhism.
Why is the lotus considered sacred?
The lotus is a symbol of Buddha. There are 3 reasons for this. The first reason is that lotus seeds don't rot, and even if the seed is 1,000 years old, it will still bud. This means that the spirit of Buddha will not be corrupted. The second reason is that the lotus grows in muddy water, but the color of its flowers doesn't change. This shows that the lotus flower is sacred. The third reason is that a lotus bears both flowers and fruit at the same time. This shows its supernatural power. 5.
What is that rosary-like thing that the worshippers are holding?
That's a juzu. A juzu is a Buddhist rosary which has 108 beads. People are supposed to have 108 worldly sins. The 108 beads represent these 108 worldly sins. Worshippers hold rosaries in their hands as they recite prayers or sutras. Hold the Buddhist rosary and put your hands together in front of your chest. The right hand is regarded as pure and the left hand impure.
Putting both hands together signifies your true self, right?
That's an excellent interpretation. Yes, it also indicates obedience to Buddha. This is the way we should pray. After praying,
Do candles, incense sticks and flowers have a specific meaning?
they are the 3 most important things we offer to the Buddha and our dead ancestors. For example, not only do candles illuminate the Buddha and our ancestors, but they also represent wisdom and mercy. Flowers purify hearts, and incense sticks give off a good aroma.
Aroma. That reminds me of aromatherapy. Aromas are good for reducing our stress levels.
Yes, aromatherapy is an effective way of making ourselves feel relaxed.
By the way, I've been wondering how the statues are cleaned and preserved.
Every year, about 20 statues are sent to the Kyoto National Treasure Repair Center and repaired by a specialist. Also, 3 statues are exhibited every year, one in the Kyoto National Museum, one in the Nara National Museum, and one in the Tokyo National Museum. 6. Showing a picture of Yanagi no Okaji. 2 big events are held on the Sunday nearest to Coming of Age Day.
What's Coming of Age Day?
We celebrate the nation's youth who have reached the age of 20 and legally become adults during the past year. They attend ceremonies held in the nearest public halls in their neighborhoods. We encourage them to live independent lives. Well, let me continue talking about these 2 events. One is Yanagi no Okaji, which is a Buddhist incantatory rite.
How are these rites conducted?
It's believed that having water sprinkled on your head with a willow branch cures your headache.
Is this a kind of magic?
No, there's a scientific relationship between aspirin and willow. As you know, aspirin is very effective for headaches. It contains salicylic acid, which is extracted from willow bark.
Oh, really? I didn't know that. Taking aspirin is different from having water sprinkled on your head, though, isn't it?
Yes, that's why it's called an incantatory rite. But there is one practical thing which is made from willow tree branches, which is a toothpick. Using a toothpick relieves a toothache.
I don't like seeing Japanese people using toothpicks at tables. Actually, they're removing bits of food, right?
Yes, but they're covering their mouths with their hands. Customs differ from country to country, so we have to be careful. 7. Let me talk about how Sanju Sangendo Temple is connected with headaches and willow trees. In one story, a retired emperor, Go-Shirakawa, suffered from a severe headache. A divine messenger appeared in his dream and said that in a previous life his head had been pierced by a branch of a big willow tree. He used willow for the ridge beam of the temple, and his headache was cured. Showing a picture of the archery contest known as Toshiya. Another major event is the archery competition. This open veranda was formerly used as an archery field. Japanese archery is closely related to Zen, and it requires concentration. It trains not only the body, but also the mind. The archery competition is a day-long event held in the traditional manner. The origin of this contest dates back to the 16th century. The winner was the contestant who successfully shot the largest number of arrows within 24 hours.
Was it difficult to hit the target?
There was no special target. It was enough for the arrow to reach the other end. The contestants had to shoot their arrows 120 meters, 400 feet.
That means they had to shoot very straight, right? What was the record?
The record was set by Wasa Daihachiro. It's recorded that he shot 13,053 arrows within 24 hours, out of which 8,133 successfully reached the end. Can you work out how often he fired off an arrow?
Let me calculate. Wow! He shot an arrow off every 10 seconds.
8. As many as 2,000 experienced archers participate in it. There are two different contests. One is for 20-year-olds celebrating their coming of age, and the other is for title holders. The 20-year-old participants try to hit a target with a diameter of 100 centimeters 60 meters away. Contestants who hold some kind of title try to hit a target with a diameter of 79 centimeters 60 meters away. The rules require all participants to shoot twice in the contest. Participants who hit the mark twice go on to the finals. Fewer than 100 participants reach the final round. The size of the target in the final round is much smaller, and those who fail to hit it drop out. The contestant who continues to hit the target wins the contest. My niece participated in this contest last year. Here's a picture of the contest. Here she is.
Wow, she's beautiful.
The contest in which the 20-year-old women participate is the most impressive. This scene is often televised.
I've read a book which says that young Japanese women wear a special kind of kimono called furisode. Are they wearing furisode?
Yes. Furisode is a formal kimono with long flowing sleeves. Single women wear furisode on formal or festive occasions. They're wearing hakama too. A hakama is a divided and pleated skirt which is worn over a kimono. They get up early to be dressed up by a kimono fitter. It costs about 10,000 yen.
Can't women put on their kimonos by themselves?
No, most women can't. They have their hair done at a hair salon for 10,000 yen too.
Wow, that's expensive. The next time I come to Japan, I want to watch this contest. I feel I've earned a lot of merit today by praying to so many Buddhist statues.